We're back. Welcome to Digging Deeper. Today we're talking about automotive world. Let's check that again. And we're trying to think of what I'm going to say. What are we talking about? We'll do it live.
We'll do it live.
Today we're talking about technicians again, but specifically in the automotive space and how you can be investing wisely to build the shop that you've always wanted. And we're back. I'm going to launch you a little diatribe here. And if it's stupid, just let me know. So if we're talking about automotive dealerships today, primarily, we may venture off a little bit, but automotive dealerships, it would seem to me, by and large, the life cycle of your customer base, that if we look at it, the relationship they have for the longest part of that life cycle is with your service and parts department. It seems like you can say unequivocally, if that's the right word, it seems like you could say unequivocally that the most important aspect of your dealership is the parts and service department. I don't know how you get around that because it has a huge component on just revenue that comes directly from it. And it's the biggest driver of the relationship that drives repeat business.
Yep. You can think of it like recruiting versus retention in the talent space.
Correct.
Recruiting is the front door,
the
sales. Retention is back of the house service and maintenance to keep them a customer until the next sales cycle.
And that thesis has a little bit of wiggle room that you could probably add in some nuance there, but there is really no nuance to the idea that, but still half of your revenue is going to come from your parts and service department. And then it has a big impact on the relationship, and that relationship will have impact on repeat business. And it seems to me, just anecdotally, looking at reviews of our prospects and clients, my own internal research of looking at reviews, that relationship between parts and service and their customers is just like, hey, wait times, they're just what's going to happen. You're going to have long wait times. It's not easy to go in and just get a simple oil change or tune up. All this kind of stuff. It's like people just come accustomed to the fact that you're going to have bad reviews, angry customers, and long wait times.
I would say it goes even further from a conversation with a dealer out of Detroit who said the long wait times weren't just impacting the customer or the guest, rather, is what is typically called at a dealer. Yeah. It's not just impacting the guest, it's also impacting the service advisor, because this is a fixed ops director who was telling me this, saying, hey, because there's so much service delays, because it takes so long to get someone in and out of the shop, a lot of the service advisors are a little gun shy to offer other options, what we would call them upselling other things, but additional service opportunities. They're being gun shy of even bringing that up because they don't want to tell the guest, hey, listen, I know you came in for just a routine oil change and maintenance, but there's actually 3 or 4 other things that you may need to consider here. They don't even bring that up. Because, man, it takes this long to get service. Now I'm backing up even more. That's not good for the business from a revenue standpoint. Certainly not good for the guest who now isn't getting their car serviced as well as they should just because the service advisor doesn't want to be the bearer of bad news.
And what we typically say is like each technician you have is going to make you somewhere between $20,000 to $30,000 of parts and service revenue per month or parts revenue per month, essentially something like that.
Depending on their efficiency, yes.
So that's kind of like your actualized, realized, revenue loss that you can say, unequivocally. I don't think that one works there. You can say that loss is there, but to Zach's point, there's no telling how much unaccounted for loss there is when you're not operating at full capacity because they're less willing to upsell. You have angry customers who don't want to come back. Like the list goes on of all the things that are unaccounted for when your shop isn't operating at its full capacity.
And based on your theory, you then lose business to maybe another dealership. So it's things that, to your point, they're not going to show up on the P&L necessarily.
Correct.
And you can't really prove it, but you know that it's happening.
Okay. So I think unequivocally.
Goodness gracious. Did unequivocally sponsor this show.
The show is brought to you by Unequivocally. I think without a doubt you can say that it is a wise investment to do whatever it takes to bring in quality technicians that allows you to give your customers and guests the best experience possible so that you can bring in more parts and service revenue and ultimately create a better relationship with your guests and customers so that you get more repeat business on the back end as well. That's a great backdrop for everything we want to talk about today.
Okay.
With that in mind, I'm sure they feel a shortage. How are most people, specifically in the automotive world, how are they investing in this issue? And do they see it in the light that I just put it in?
I would say I found some that do it very well and understand it and have even made the comment they heavily invest in it, and they are always looking for not only additional mechanics, but we used to have a sign at Randall Reilly. You guys tell me if I'm wrong. I'm going to misquote it, but it was something to do with always looking for good talent. And they've made the comment before that if there's a good mechanic, ASE certified, journeyman, whatever, we want to talk to them constantly.
Yeah.
And they're willing to always be looking at those applications and resumes and, investing in the money to get that out there. They do realize that those are difficult to come by, and you just don't run an Indeed post for 1 month and you get those kind of things. But on the flip side, I've also seen quite a bit of apathy where it's just we always have an opening. It just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost lost its
Fight.
Yeah, but they don't think they can solve that problem. So, and then the third piece I would add to that is, and I've mentioned this in quite a few of our in-person meetings, that our best relationships are when we are working with HR, marketing, and fixed ops or the general manager, because there are quite a few, and this is not a slam towards any one of those groups, but if they're not working together, there's quite a few of the marketing folks that say, we're already doing something, we don't need your help.
Yeah.
Or HR says, same thing, no, we're good. But when you talk to the fixed ops or the service manager, they say, I know they're doing something, but it's not solving my problem.
Right.
So anyway, I do think there's a few nuances to it.
Our best meetings are when those three are in the same meeting together because they all work together. We talk about it all the time, right? With on the front end, what messaging is out in the market? What videos are you putting on the market? What does your job look like to a technician online or any service advisor, any role you're looking after? Right. What does the message look like? That's marketing. Mm-hmm. They play a part in that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, once it comes in, how does it look like to pre-qualify that lead to see if they're even a good fit?
All right.
And okay, so that's where HR plays a role. And then once they get to interview stage, do they ghost you? Were they actually a fit? What other feedback would you have? Are they going to be a good fit in the shop? That's the service manager and fixed ops guy. Mm-hmm. So end to end, if you operate as three separate departments, all pulling tug of war, you will never win.
Okay.
Or
well, so that's
a challenge.
That segues nicely. So where do you see shops, dealerships, where do you see them going wrong and how they're trying to bring in technician or just any sort of automotive dealership talent?
I have one that we've talked about before that I'm seeing more and more auto dealers do it. And it's the idea of a dedicated recruiting team.
Right.
Like, I think with our background being obviously CDL driver, for hire fleet, where the recruiting team is a true machine in the organization, that where it's 100% just about in the for hire fleet market, it may be 10% in auto, but I think it's picking up traction. I'm at least on more calls where there's a dedicated recruiting team, but the majority are, hey, once somebody comes in, once they submit their information, it goes to an HR generalist who has other responsibilities. It may go to the fixed ops director. It may go straight to the service manager. Call it what it is. They don't have the bandwidth to actually recruit these people. And so they feel like they're being ghosted. No one's answering the phone. That is a reality that happens, which is why dedicated recruiting exists.
Right. So if we say like graphics, sponsored by Audrey, Mistake number one is maybe you're getting in the right candidates or sourcing the right leads or however you want to say it. But if you don't have someone dedicated or someone with the bandwidth or the investment to really give those applicants their due, that's a big area that you're going to fall short.
Yep.
All right. What would be mistake number two that you may see?
A very large percentage, not all, but a very large percentage of our current clients and even our prospects, when they are sourcing, they're sourcing a full application and a lot of times wanting a resume. And that's a big thing I see is they're eliminating a very large percentage that aren't ready to do the full application or don't have a resume.
Yeah. So what I've seen, and they all point to the same thing and they're slightly different stats, but the general idea is about 20% of the technician population is actually actively looking for a job. And someone who's actively looking for a job is far more likely to put in a full application. Mm-hmm. But that leaves a huge component, your 70 to 80%, who aren't actively looking for a job. Although what I've seen is that 55% of those are impressionable, that they would actually consider it. But considering it may look like I'm going to fill out a short form or maybe call someone to just want to talk about it, but I'm not going to give you a full app. And to your point, if you're only working full applications, you're getting probably the less experienced technician who's actively looking for a job. There's probably some gold in there and there's space for that, but you're missing a huge piece of the pie.
And I will say, again, on the fixed ops or service manager side, that the relationship that a new employee has on the shop, is it a good culture fit?
Right.
Is very important. Mm-hmm. And at least from the day that we've seen, those who are more actively looking for jobs tend to be looking because they're not a culture fit where they're at.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a catch-22, but so many people want the technician who's a journeyman, who's been at one shop for 20 years, he doesn't hop jobs.
Right.
He's a great fit, but they just assume that he's on Indeed this month, the one time. That is it.
Yeah. Number three would be what, if there is a number three?
I think most auto dealers today are heavily leveraged on active searchers.
Yeah.
So only. It's everybody's running job boards.
Yep.
Pick your job board. They're all out there. Everybody's running those. Everybody's partnering with the schools and kind of growing them from the bottom. But it is very rare that we talk to someone who has a dedicated strategy to target someone with 2 or 3 years of experience who isn't necessarily looking for a job. That is a rarity, which means they kind of have one of three options. You're either A, you got to be okay with some of those positions remaining open.
Right.
Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. 2, keep doing what you're doing on the job board side and hope for better results.
Yep.
It's probably not the best option either. Or
Nope.
3, you got to find a way to reach those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we would love to help in that regard, but whether it's us or someone else, the reality is you got to find a way to reach those guys, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to fill the positions. The fourth problem, I think it's a misconception in the market right now, but I think it's a warranted misconception, which is technicians just leave because of pay. All they care about is the money. They'll leave for another dollar. That may be somewhat true.
Right.
However, there are more things that a technician cares about other than the dollar.
Yeah.
I know we ran a survey that said, hey, give me the top 5 reasons why you would leave a company. Pay was not number 1.
Right.
Number 1 was the culture fit. They left because of the culture.
Yeah.
So our advice to auto dealers and really anyone looking for a candidate is the moment you get them on the phone and you're talking to them, they're going to say they want to make more money.
Right.
Everybody wants to make more money.
Correct.
The next question out of your mouth needs to be something along the lines of, okay, outside of money, what else are you looking for?
Yeah, what matters to you?
Or if your current employer were to offer you $2 or $3 more an hour, they were to pay you more, do you think you would stay? Most times the answer is, well, no. Okay, well, why? Now you're building out what the value prop for your business might be, and you're going to get that technician or that service advisor, parts counter, whatever. You're going to get them not just because of the money,
right,
but because of the culture, the leadership team, career progression.
Well, one thing we talked about on the last Digging Deeper, link here, is the idea of having an articulated employment value proposition.
Yeah.
And it has to be beyond what you pay. And so anyone, it's not, and we talked about also getting all three departments together to say, what is our actual employment value proposition? And having a concise way of articulating that on a phone call to somebody and saying like, hey, one thing that we do better than everybody else is because we really invest in getting the right people in here and having a fully staffed shop, we don't do a lot of forced weekends or forced overtime type stuff, which was a big component of when we looked at the survey of things that technicians did not like, by the way. All right, so we have our 4. We got not having someone dedicated to actually work with the applications and the short apps that come in. Number 2 would be only working full apps. Number 3 is only looking at the active job seekers, leveraging the job board world. And number 4 and final is thinking that it's always just about pay that makes a technician go to another job. There's a lot more to that. All right, so we're going to play a little game where I pretend that both of you are over a dealership and you believe in that it's really important to invest in bringing in the right technicians, and you have all the knowledge that you have as talent acquisition experts. What would you do at your dealership if I said, all right, I need you to do whatever it takes to bring in the right talent to get our parts and service department where I want it to be? What would you do?
I would identify process issues, gaps.
Okay.
How can we streamline our process? And we've talked about it before. If I am the GM, I would fill out an application and see what happens. How quickly I'm followed up with.
Right.
What is that experience like?
Step 1, secret shop your own process.
And so many clients and prospects talk about the culture you mentioned. It's tough to sell culture too. It's really tough to sell culture in a job posting ad.
Right.
Bingo.
But how do you even convey culture? And again, there's a difference between an HR crafted requirements job posting. This is the job and this is what's required for you to be hired, versus a marketing, here's what we have to offer, benefits, features.
Here's the value to you.
That's right. And, and or video.
Right.
So again, maybe if you
not
added.
Not and or, and.
That's a
it
good
does
point.
not need to be or.
I guess what I meant is without video, it'll cost you $0 to update your advertising.
Yeah.
But I would say spend some money on some video content. Now, I've seen some really nice drone footage where they fly through the shop. Like, that's great. But you could also just walk around and get a couple of your great technicians talking about what they love about it, how long they've been there.
Yep.
Anyway, so those are a couple of things I would say.
Okay.
From a people perspective, we talked about process. What's broken in the process that's keeping me from maybe getting more people into the business? I would also want to know, because I've seen it and I'm sure you have too, what in the process is broken that's keeping somebody from doing what they do best?
Right.
An example being a service manager. If I'm a GM, the last thing I want a service manager to be doing is spending hours a day trying to get somebody on the phone for an application.
Right.
Like, they are way better served doing something else. Even fixed ops. Like, think about what is your core responsibility for the company. This goes back to the recruiter piece, obviously, but there are people in the business now that are spending a good chunk of their time doing something that isn't high value.
Right.
They are wasting their time trying to get someone on the phone. I need to reallocate that time to something I'm paying them to do, which is going to add more value, and then assign that to someone else to make that their full-time gig.
Okay. Now let's spend some money. We haven't spent any money yet, and I gave you a big chunk of change. So let's spend some money. What are you going to invest in?
How much money we got?
Plenty.
I mean, self-serving, I would hire somebody who's good at talent acquisition.
Right.
That's why we're on here. That's what we do, is the ability to craft the right message, streamline the process, and get the message in front of the right audience.
Right.
And some of it sounds elementary, but it is surprising how many, again, a lot of it has to do with they don't have someone dedicated to it, but how few people use texting when they're trying to talk to especially in the technician space. And secondly, how few text before they call.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm about to give you a call. Be on the lookout. Again, that sounds elementary, but that's where we come in to be able to do a lot of that
Right.
on your behalf. I was on a call recently, and large auto group, dealer group,
Yep.
and we've helped them in multiple locations, 5, 6, 7 locations.
Yep.
Now, the good and the bad is they've all been somewhat one-off. This one location needed 2. This one needed 2. This one needed 3.
Yep.
And we've been able to fill those roles pretty quickly, which is another thing. It's not a long-term contract.
Right.
You know, we'll spin those campaigns up, and once you get the candidates in the pipeline and interview and hired, then we'll shut that off. I will say that the dealer principal or GM, somebody made the comment on the call. I guess one of the fixed ops managers was asking a question because we were about to spin it up for another location, and they said something about a journeyman or some type of certification that they wanted, and is that something that they could expect? And the dealer principal piped in and said, "Hey, I'm going to be honest. I don't want you to be." He was sticking up for us, but he said, "I don't want you to be underwhelmed by what Randall Reilly does. But in the campaigns we've run so far, I have not seen a whole lot of journeymen show up. We filled them with really good roles, but we have not seen that high of a technician." And I said, "Well, hold on, time out. I would like to tell you why you haven't seen that."
Yeah.
The good and the bad is we only ran the campaign for 60 days. So if you want to hit that kind of a technician, this needs to be a 12-month commitment where I am pushing that message out in front of a passive audience who's not looking for a job for months. I don't know if that's good or bad, but the point is you have to be willing to be in front of an audience that isn't actively looking for quite some time.
Right.
So
It's an investment, and you want to invest long term because, as you said, there's a lot of technicians that really understand this idea of having the right people at your dealership, how much of a difference that makes to your bottom line, not just in parts and service, but in having repeat customers and being able to upsell and all this sort of stuff. It is totally worth it to have a 12-month contract or a 12-month investment that keeps that message in front of the right people for a long period of time. All right, well, I thought that was a pretty good episode. And I think we'll wrap it up there.
See you next time on Digging Deeper. Thanks for joining us.